Pat Mayo Experience, the Sentry Tournament of Champions DraftKings picks, and preview a no-cut event to kick off the DraftKings golf season. If you missed my breakdown of DraftKings strategy for the DraftKings season, for golf that is, you can go check that out right now on the DraftKings YouTube channel or up on my podcast feed under the Pat Mayo Experience, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all up there on demand with a handy guide for a show index for whatever you want to learn about. We touched on everything from no-cut events to single entries to how to pick what tournaments you want to be in, how to build 20 lineups, where to research, the best tools to use, everything you need to know. Jeff Bergerson did that with me from FantasyGolfInsider.com, and Ben Rasa from FanVice.com, who is on the line to break this tournament down with me today. Ben, golf is back. How pumped are you?
Golf is back. Yeah, I mean, this is a little warm-up, little appetizer. Only 34 people, non-cut, but I'll take what I can get. No complaints here.
No, it's just nice to have real golf with, like, stakes and, like, elite players, some crappy players, and now we got to mine some value against. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get into the strategy of a 34-player event as well. I do want to remind everyone, give the show a like, and if you are on the YouTube page or on the iTunes page, leave a review, give us a like, and for the final time, hopefully, for the new studio draw, hopefully some DraftKings bucks can be in your way, but you can get into the draw by leaving your DraftKings name and your favorite play under $7,500 on DraftKings this week. So again, under $7,500, your favorite play, your DraftKings name, boom, you're in the draw. Doesn't mean you automatically win, but you could win by being when I draw the names out of a hat and see who ends up winning. And again, when we move into our new studio, I will release who the winners of that are going to be. So Ben, let's get to it right away. At the top end, we got three big names sticking out to us right away. There's actually four, but the big three that we're going with right now, you have Justin Thomas as the most expensive player, and then you have Jordan Spieth, then Ricky Fowler, and then Dustin Johnson is hanging just above the $10,000 mark at 10-3. But I want to talk about those big three to begin with. Do you have a preference between any one of the three? And how do you play it with a shorter field like this? Because for me, I'm going with Spieth, and I'm probably going to play him in 100% of lineups.
Yeah, I actually lean Spieth as well. This is interesting. With 34 guys, it really does change kind of the whole makeup. You got to worry about a lot of different things. Roster construction, I think, is more important, trying to be unique. So I'm more apt to take kind of more of a bold stand up top. All these guys are good plays, but yeah, Spieth obviously loves the place, has been tearing it up. Won here in 2016, third last year. I think he was second in 13 or 14. So clearly likes it. I just think it fits his style. I'm sure most people, if you take a look, it's super easy fairways, super easy greens, but to hit the greens. Now, when you get on them, it's a little outrageous. I mean, I'm sure you have a better read on it, but I've read that some of these greens just have like outrageous slopes that they don't really see anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, the biggest corollary to how the greens are actually set up is Augusta with like the weird undulations. Unfortunately, for a lot of the field, these greens aren't quite as fast. So I think when you actually look at the three corollary courses that I found that have just produced a lot of similar winners and a lot of success, the big one was the John Deere Classic, weirdly enough. So when you look back at it, Spieth has won there, Zach Johnson has won both, Steve Stricker has won both, VJ has won both, Jonathan Bird has won at both. So I found that very, very interesting for a course that ranks as one of the easier ones on tour. And this one was the easiest. Kapalua was the easiest course in 2017 when it came down to everything. 50th of 50th in difficulty ranking. So there's going to be birdies galore. So a birdie fest like the John Deere Classic does make a lot of sense. A lot of wedges, a lot of hot putting, and you do need a good short game. Not because... It's funny because I was talking through this with Jeff Feinberg and a few other people. I actually think that short game means a lot this week, only because you need to save par on a lot of things. Bogeys will get you going in the wrong direction. And when the winning score is going to be like minus 21 to minus 30, bogeys will sink your week. Like last year, Spieth actually led the field in birdies. He had one more than Justin Thomas did, yet he lost strokes around the green, which is really atypical of Jordan Spieth. So I think that now coming into it, he's gaining 2.2 strokes per event over his last 5 events around the greens. Coming into this event last year, he was actually losing 0.5 of a stroke around the green. So I think now that has rectified itself, that Jordan Spieth is just going to be the guy to catch here.
Yeah, no, I really do think it sets up well. Obviously, I mean, we know what he can do with the putter, and guys are going to have a ton of putts because they hit so many greens. They're probably going to be longer putts. But yeah, it's just a weird, it's a weird situation just with the way this tournament kind of unfolded with the 34 guys. I do like, I'm just going to throw it out there. I know we're kind of working down, I'm really high on Rom. It's a little gut feel, I feel like, but just the way, I mean, he really should just be hitting wedges into everything. I expect him to hit obviously a ton of greens and just really have a good showing here.
Weirdly enough, when you look at it, I think that everyone is going to be hitting wedges into almost every single green. It's going to be a wedge or it's going to be a long iron. When you look at the whole distribution, you have really short par fours. There are 6 that are under 400 yards, which is kind of crazy. And then you have 3 that are over 500 yards. And the par 5s aren't really gettable in 2. So you're going to have wedges and you're going to have long irons. When I put up my key stats, I actually combined my strokes gain proximity ranges. So I had from 125 yards and in and beyond 200 yards, which it's really difficult to track really rolling stats right now because so many of the swing season events or the Euro events or even the Australian events just aren't counted. We don't have specific numbers from those. And, the stats will be far more meaningful in the middle of February when we have a larger sample size. But I think that historically, when you look at that, I think that's a pretty good basis to go off of.
Yeah, it's weird because, that was my first thought. This course is so easy. But there's not a lot of eagles, which obviously, yeah, clearly these par 5s, you can't really get there in 2 and get reasonable looks. So I do want guys, who are hitting wedge, and you're right. There's going to be a ton of guys who are hitting either, wedges or short irons, and then on those other holes, the longer irons. But yeah, you have Ram, you have Koepka, Leishman. I really don't know where to go kind of in that next range. You have any feel there?
I do, and I mean, knowing me, I'm probably way off on this one, but I'm going to start all my teams with Spieth and then try to figure it out. Hideki is my next favorite player. In 2 starts at the Tournament of Champions, he has a 2nd and a 3rd. And weirdly enough, when it comes to Hideki, like if he's putting poorly here, he comes 3rd. If he just gets like an average putting week and can figure these out a little bit, I think that he's going to be very much in contention. And I'm not quite sure where his ownership is going to be at because I know a lot of people want to use Spieth, tons of people are going to use Ricky. I see more people dropping down to that Rahm, Brooks, Leishman era, but just because they're so much cheaper and that can allow you to build a stronger roster at the bottom, which I think is very sensible in a tournament like this when you look at the players that have performed well here in the past. Like, you don't very rarely see a first-time winner. Frankly, first-timers struggle a lot at this event historically, and it's the second and third time around that they tend to do well. And then when you see the players that have performed really well as first-timers, they're all elite guys like Spieth and Hideki. They're coming inside the top 5. I can see the similar thing with Rahm, but Hideki would be my next move. So Spieth, Hideki, then you drop down. You have like $7,300 left to play with. Fortunately, there's some guys in the $6,000 area that I really do like.
Yeah, I think there's some people down there. You got my boy Grayson, Kyle Stanley, some of our favorites, even Bryson. You talked about the John Deere. I hope that correlates because, yeah, I could see him having a good – the other thing to factor in, I don't know, you think there's going to be wind? I know it's a little early to project the weather, but I am a little worried that some of the guys that I kind of like could have some issues if it gets breezy.
Well, I think that's where short game really comes into play. At the tournaments, like there was a 54-hole event because of massive rain and wind a few years ago. That's the year that Dustin Johnson won. And only 3 rounds. It finished on a Monday. It was just kind of like a tournament. But wind can come out of here out of nowhere. It's really hard to project on the coast in Hawaii. They're right on the ocean, so you can get like a 2-hour stretch where it's devastating. But I think there will always be sort of, I don't want to say considerable winds, but I think it'll hover in that like 15 to 20 area, which can be pretty tough. And I mean, people like to look at Aussies when it comes to that kind of thing. I'm going to focus more on short game because if the irons start getting a bit wonkier, and we know a lot of these high ball flight guys with their wedges that can blow a little bit, that you can save yourself a lot of strokes with an excellent short game. I too like Bryson DeChambeau. I think he's sort of a discount Patrick Cantlay this week. They're both, excellent. I mean, Cantlay's better, but he's also way more expensive. Great with irons, pretty good putters, good off the tee. Both really have problematic short games. So that would lead me, I mean, I'm going to take some Bryson, but not as much as I would have liked if he had just had a better short game. Down in that range, like, I'll probably end up focusing on like Wes Bryan and those types of players who can really get it done from 100 yards and in. But near the top, weirdly enough, one of the guys that I do really like because of the short game and the John Deere Classic corollary is Brian Harman at $8,700. He comes in with 3 straight top 10s, and when you look at his rolling stats, it's hard to project because 2 of those tournaments didn't have trackable stats for them. So he wasn't hitting his irons well through the back end of the season, but now he has 3 straight top 10s, and one of them he actually lost strokes on approach and gained a whole bunch through a short game. I would have to figure that happened over in Asia as well. So I really like Brian Harman here, and he's not a first-timer because, he did win the John Deere Classic a few years ago, struggled a little bit here, but the second time around for a lot of these players, and at his price point mixed in with names like Cantley, Leishman, and Brooks, I just think that he's going to go wildly underowned.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think he's slightly overpriced, which in a week like this, honestly, it's not, you can work around that because the ownership is going to be so inflated across the board with limited options. He's definitely going to be, I'd say, the lowest owned in that range. We were talking about Brooks and Leishman. People love to play Cantlay. And even, Kisner's right there, Berger. There's a ton of guys to play. So I agree with that. I'm a little worried. You said he hasn't been great here, but yeah, maybe seeing the course before will kind of help him the next time around because I think he only has the one appearance here.
Yeah, and even with Justin Thomas won last year. He was like T22 his first time around. So it does take it takes 4 rounds to kind of get used to the layout. It's also a very difficult terrain with a lot of elevation changes. It really mitigates the problems that a lot of the shorter hitters off the tee. When you go back and look at the past champions, Spieth, Reed, Steve Stricker, Zach Johnson, Jonathan Bird, these aren't exactly bombers. Not to say that bombers can't win at this course, but at 90% of the courses on tour, bombers have a significant advantage because of their distance. This just seems to be one of the tracks where that's not a thing.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important to reiterate, one of the reasons bombers are always good, especially in DraftKings scoring, is because of eagles, and that's somewhat mitigated here. You're not going to see as many. They're not going to get those bonuses. Obviously, there's going to be streaks and, the bonuses for the good rounds most likely, but you're not going to see the eagle discrepancy where you kind of want those long hitters who can get there in 2.
This is true. The only one that's really, you're going to find some eagles on the course. There were 10 on the par 5s all of last year, so it's going to be wildly difficult to predict, but the 14th hole is drivable for some of the long hitters. I remember Justin Thomas making eagle there last year. I believe it was in the opening round. Maybe it was in the second round. Either way, that one's gettable for some of the longer hitters, but that's about it. And even then, like hitting a drive onto the green and making eagle is pretty difficult.
Yeah, I don't think that's that may happen here and there, but obviously it's not. I don't think you're going to be missing out if you have Wesley Bryan, who clearly won't be doing that.
This is true, but the one good thing about those shorter hitters on some of these shorter holes, that one included, is they can still get to whatever positive wedge range that they want. Like if Wes Bryant feels comfortable from like 110 and in, he can get it to 110 every time here. Like that's not that big of a problem. The whole distances will allow the players off the tee to get to their sweet spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why putting the emphasis on wedges and the approach, I think is clearly the way to go because it's such forgiving. Wesley Brown, I keep kind of talking about him. He just can't hit off the tee. So this is the kind of place where I would hope he could keep it in play. It's such generous fairways. If he can attack the pin at that price, it is tempting.
It's tempting, and the players aren't going to be cut, so you're going to get your 4 rounds. I made this mistake with Scott Piercy 2 years ago, and he was terrible. I did it with Siwoo Kim last year. I think he came dead last. And the year before, like Jeff Ogilvy was a hot sleeper. They come dead last. Like it sucks from that range, but you need, I think, one player from under $7,500 last year finished inside the top 10, and that was Pat Perez, and he came 10th. So it's difficult to really get a gauge on some of these lower guys. You just have to hope they go out and score, and hopefully, even your T13, maybe that leads to a lot of birdies, or maybe you can sneak someone into the top 10.
Yeah, that's just kind of how you have to do it. In a tournament like this, you're going to try to find guys that are going to outscore their placement points. It's not going to be a direct correlation just because there's going to be so many birdies. So, if you can get a guy who comes in 12th in the tournament, but he may have the 8th most points, and obviously that'll be a big bonus.
So, using Fantasy National and the rolling stats, you can become a member today if you go to fantasynational.com. The one thing that I've been telling a lot of people is that, almost like we talked about before, there's been a lot of tournaments lately during the swing season and with a lot of players playing overseas that those stats just aren't accounted for because there's no way to measure them. And you can't just make them up. There's strokes gained total, but that's really about it. It's hard to figure out what people were doing. So I posted in my column on dkplaybook.com, my key stats, and one of them was was strokes gained short game, which is an amalgamation of strokes gained around the green and strokes gained putting. So normally I don't go back for the last 100 rounds. I like to see how players are doing, pretty recently, but the last 8, 24, and even 50 rounds could get fudged a little bit because there's tournaments missing. So I did want to take the larger sample of 100 rounds to really give me a historical perspective of who does these things well. So when I look at short game, the best players in the field are Spieth, Herman, Fowler, Kisner, and Perez. Then it's Blixt, Brooks, Rahm, Wes Bryant, and Mark Leishman. So of that group, I mean, Mark Leishman's going to probably be a fade for me because he's going to be popular. I like Herman in that area, or I'll just move up to Hideki. But Cam Smith is someone that I like who has a really good short game. Kisner, I think, is somewhat interesting, but I kind of want to hit Pat Perez as well. He's just playing awesome right now, and I don't think that people understand that he gets hot on some of these birdie-making courses.
Yeah, no, he's a guy I rarely play, honestly, but I'm actually on board with that. He had a really good swing season, and he really does. This is the kind of format for him, non-cut, because if he gets off to an ugly start, he can rally, and he can get crazy hot. So I do like him in that range. I like Henley. I mean, I'm a sucker for Henley. I play him all the time, but I think he feeds into the, good putter, good with the wedges. Off the tee is not going to matter as much. I think that helps him. He should benefit from the easy fairways, easy greens.
Henley worries me a little bit because every single person that I've spoken with this week or just read on Twitter is all over
that's
Russell
the kiss
Henley.
Of death,
but it's not even it's the kiss of death. It's just with a 34-man field, if you're going to have Russell Henley, who's the chalk at $7,800, I feel like that's an easy fade when I can move on to Pat Perez for $200 more, or I can just drop down. I mean, Cam Smith is going to be super chalky as well, but I mean, if you just faded Henley and Smith and those guys don't come top 5, you get your pick of like Brennan Steele, who's no one's going to use, came 6th here last year. Like, I think there are enough pivots in that range that it kind of works out that I think they're logical fades. Whether that works out, I don't know, but if you're trying to scrape some ownership out of your lineups right here, I think those are two guys to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, again, with only 34 guys, ownership is going to be really, really inflated. And obviously trying to get, this is more of a macro approach, but making sure that you do the best you can to not get duped is going to be important. This is a week where I consciously will leave salary on the table to kind of try to differentiate and make sure I just don't have a lineup that 50 other people have.
What do you think is a reasonable amount to leave on the table? Because I think if you start leaving like $500 on the table, you're in the clear. I see other people, they leave like $2,300 on the table. That's probably a bit too much.
Yeah, I think people get a little extreme with it. I mean, I'm usually pretty close to the full cap. In a normal week, I'll leave a couple hundred here and there. I think anything, in a field like this, upwards of 1,000, I think you can make it work. But if you're talking about basically a situation where you can have someone like Billy Horschel, or you could just go get like Brooks or Matt, Hideki, that's a tough sell. I don't think leaving thousands of dollars is really necessary, and most likely you should just probably upgrade.
Yeah, I think it's completely unnecessary and foolish as well, mainly because when you look at the tournament history of the Tournament of Champions, that it's always the good players who play well, like and finish inside the top 10. So if you're just, like you mentioned, like let's use that as an extreme example, like you're leaving Brooks off the table because you want to save salary and you have Billy Horschel in, like Brooks probably has a 9-to-1 chance of finishing inside the top 10 over Billy Horschel does.
Yeah, no, it's just it's no good getting a unique lineup that's just garbage, obviously. I mean, there's a fine line, but there are ways to do it where you leave some salary and you reduce that risk. And then if you have a reasonable team that's unique, you can really make a hit.
So of the top guys, I want to circle back to the top and just how to approach this when building multiple lineups. Like I'm probably going to play like 20 lineups this week. I mentioned I'll use Spieth in all of them. What should I then do to diversify myself at the top end? Like I like Ricky. I mean, I like John Rahm. I like Dustin Johnson. I like Justin Thomas. But there's just no way that I can use all of them. And I don't want to water down. If I'm only playing 20 lineups, like I don't want to water down each of them by having a little bit of each. I'd rather just push on one guy, hope that guy wins, or one of those guys don't, and my guy finishes above them, and then I feel like I've separated myself from the pack. But like I feel like no one's going to use Dustin Johnson this week, and it seems to me like not many are going to use Justin Thomas either. As pivot plays at the top, would those be the two lower owned elite options, do you think?
I think in terms of ownership, definitely. And for me, the way obviously some things may change. It's only Tuesday, but I like DJ. I'm just not paying up for JT. I really don't want to go there. I'm gonna have a lot of teams that start DJ Rom or Spieth, right? A combination of that. I think that's a pretty interesting build. It doesn't really, you got to go low, but I was already planning on, you're gonna have to take someone from the cheaper range, kind of regardless of what you do. And I'm just not looking to pay, north of 11K for JT this week.
I could see that, but if it leads to JT being 8% owned, I think that would then become the move, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if I just can't imagine. I think he comes in a little higher than that personally. I think you get a reduction in ownership, but I don't know if it's going to be as extreme where I want to play him just solely on the ownership.
Do you think that Brooks might go under owned just because Leishman and Rahm he's sandwiched right in between them, that he could just be a dead zone player because he's not getting the hype the other two are?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to disperse the ownership there. I do expect a lot of people to try to pair up a couple guys in that range, whether it's Hideki, Rahm, Brooks, combination of them. The guy, you already talked about him. Harmon is going to be in the dead zone. I mean, nobody's going to play him. Brooks, we've talked about this before. People love to play Brooks. He's one of those guys that, he always has ownership, and I expect that this week. I don't think it's going to be over the top, but I don't know. Harmon's the guy, if you're really looking solely on ownership, that will be really underowned.
And I really like him skill set as well. It's going to be really difficult to stack this week just because there's so few people. Everyone's basically on the course at the same time. But I think it might be worth going in. Like you said, you're going to play a lot of DJ Rahm to begin your team. Like I would, if I was going to do that, and I was going to take that certain skill set, because they're both very similar. Like when you look at the tournaments that Jon Rahm and Dustin Johnson do well, and they tend to both do well at the exact same time. Would you then translate that skill set as a build down the list, whether it's, take Grayson on that team, take Johnny Vegas on that team, like that sort of player, or do you think that's overthinking it too much?
Oh no, 100. Next person out of my mouth was Grayson will be the guy that I kind of build with them at the bottom. Yeah, I like to correlate my teams like that. It doesn't always work, obviously, but I just think you talked about it. If DJ and Rahm are excelling, I think that someone like Grayson or Vegas that you mentioned has an elevated chance to kind of also excel, just because it's the same skill set that translates. You still have to find the balance. You can't just take, I mean, it is non-cut, so you can be way more aggressive and take more volatile players. But in a normal week, you can't just take 6 crazy guys because you'll never get them through the cut.
If you want to start with a contrarian build that no one's going to use, at least in my perspective from what I've been reading and just my sense of how this week is going to play out, if you went with a Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele build to start, and then major teams around that. I mean, the last time that there was an uber competitive real event, these guys did come 1 and 2. You're dealing with the Rookie of the Year and the Player of the Year, yet no one wants to own them. It's really weird. And I'm on board with, I don't really want to own them either, and I can't really peg why.
Yeah, I mean, I have this happen to me all the time. Like, that's very true. It seems interesting. There's no chance that I make teams with JT and Xander together. Like, I don't know why either, because it's not horrible, but I just still have I don't know if it's a bias or not. I don't want to pay for Xander. I would much rather have Kisner right below him. And kind of the same for JT. I would just, like, Spieth and Kisner to me is the pairing I want in the same range.
Berger has been Andercursed. Does that just cross him off the list for you?
Yeah, it's certainly closer to the full fade now. I like to target him in non-cuts too. He's just, I don't know, he hasn't been great lately. And again, we've talked about, I think I'm higher on Perez than most, as are you. So I'm not sure how much room I have for Berger right in that range.
Yeah, I guess the other guy in the $8,000 range, Patrick Cantlay, he's a fair price. He's playing really well. I mean, people think that he's going to make the leap into a top 20, potentially top 10 player in the world. Do you think? I don't necessarily know if it's going to translate into his DK ownership this week because there's so many bigger names that are affordable, even $1,000 above him when you get into the Brooks and you get into the Leishman and the Rahms of the world. What do you make of Patrick Cantlay here? Because the way that I kind of described it is, if I'm really going to commit to saying that short game does mean a lot, which I really do think that it does, that kind of crosses off Cantlay for me. And if I wanted a similar skill set player, I think I would just pay down for Bryson.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to have much Cantlay for a couple of reasons. One, you just touched upon. I don't know how well this will suit him. And the other thing is just, I really think, me included, the build that I'm doing is I'm going to have 2 guys that are priced above him. And when you do that, you kind of dead range that mid-8 those guys. So most likely I'm just going to have guys below him and above him, but I don't know how much exposure I really get around him. And if I did, again, we keep saying this, I would probably pay down for someone like Kisner or try to get up to Rom. I'm not sure that I would go there.
In the $8,000 to $7,000 range, like Perez leads that off. We're both on board. We both like Perez. Henley and Cam Smith seem to be the two that everyone are gravitating towards in terms of ownership. And I think that Cam Smith makes a more compelling case than Russell Henley. After he won the team championship at the Zurich, he missed 7 of his next 9 cuts, although he spiked at the Wyndham, which was a T7, which is a corollary course that I have found for Kapalua. And then, he gets to the BMW championship, 25th, goes overseas, starts racking up top 10s, culminates with a win at the Australian PGA Championship his last time out, a 4th the week before at the Australian Masters. So everyone is on him. I like him too. Listen, I have no problem with Cam Smith, but he might get too owned for my liking. I'm hoping Henley steals away some of his heat just a little bit, but Cam Smith will be in my lineups. I'll fade Henley because of the ownership. Is there anyone else in that range that you like a lot? Because I'm looking at Duffner and I'm like, I don't love Duffner here, but he has, when he's playing well, the type of game that I do like.
Yeah, he's the guy, and it's funny. I literally could say the same thing about Cam Smith with me being Henley. Like, I hope Cam Smith takes all the ownership. I'm not going to play him because I'm going to have Henley. So I feel you there. Duffner's a guy I looked at and I didn't really want to play him, but now I'm kind of warming up to the idea. His skill set, obviously, I think I'd like to play him where he doesn't have to drive the ball and bomb it because it's just not his game. When he gets going with the irons, yeah, he can get crazy hot too. Not that he's similar to Perez, but I do kind of, for some reason, think of them in the same where they can just really score if they get going. No chance that he's popular. I think, you talked about Henley and Cam Smith. So I like him. And then, you touched upon Brandon Steele. I always like to play him. He was solid here last year, so no problem pivoting there as well.
Yeah, I think the pivot in this range is Brendan Steele. Some people might give a look to Kazire. That's not really for me. Exactly. So, I like Perez the most. I like Cam Smith. I like Brendan Steele. A lot of people are going to be using my guy, Austin Cook, as well. And I love Austin Cook, don't get me wrong. I don't know if I really want to eat Austin Cook chalk coming off his first career win in a tournament he's never played at before.
Yeah, no, not for me. I would much rather play someone like Bryson.
I think statistically Cook lines up a little bit better. He's a great putter. He has a great short game where Bryson has one of the most disastrous short games. At least last year he did. And that could really become problematic. But if he starts rolling it like he did at John Deere, wedges, make your 10-footer and be on your way, that sets up perfectly for him, not so much Austin Cook.
Yeah, it's one of these things. Obviously, everyone here is one, and there's a path for all of them to play good. I don't see many ways where Cook really gets there, in terms of knocking on the door of a pretty big finish. Where I think if you get the good putting and short game from Bryson, his range of outcomes is decently high. There is upside there. So in these, obviously, to win these big field tournaments, you're going to need all your guys to kind of be up there on the leaderboard.
Yeah, this is true. So from that bottom range, and the one thing with Bryson is that short game scares me enough that I was going to go massively overweight on him, but I'm not anymore. He's just going to be a part of the 3-4 people at the bottom that I mix into my lineups with my really big core guys. Like, I'll be mixing in Wes Bryant with that. Like, I don't even know. I get why I'm high on Wes Bryant. It's the short game. It's the irons. It's the lack of accountability off the tee where he struggles so much, like you mentioned, that I'm really big on. And I just know that, like, if we've seen him, and it's another John Deere Classic thing. The guy's played John Deere Classic twice. Even in the midst of his awful stretch, he still came top 10 at that event this year. Back-to-back top 10s at the JDC. So I just find that very encouraging for his potential. And listen, I'm not saying Wes Bryant's going to win, but he could come like T7 here. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and obviously, where he's priced, he can give his room to get there is gigantic. You don't need him to win. You just need him to not finish like 30th or worse, obviously. If he can bust into the top 15, that's going to definitely be a bonus for you.
The other guy from down there, only $6,100. I will have, let's say we have 20 lineups. I'll use like 3 or 4 of them with Ryan Armour in them. Armour hot dogs.
Yeah, this guy, you see him anytime I run any types of stats, this guy just pops up. I really don't know what to make of him, to be honest. Him, and I didn't even know DA points. I'll be honest. I didn't know he won last year. I was wondering how the hell he got in here, but yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I probably most likely are just going to stop at Wes. I'll have some Grayson, and then, I'm sure this is more on your wavelength. I rarely play him, but Siwoo Kim, I mean, in a non-cut, I think he's just always in play. Either he could win, he could come in dead last. The range of outcomes is it's the full spectrum, but worth some flyers.
Yeah, I've tried to get away from a Siwoo Kim habit by just betting him outright to win every tournament. Then I just don't use him in DraftKings because
no, that actually is a smart way to do it. Just because he's gonna probably cash a ticket or two for you every year and then get cut or withdraw most of the other weeks.
I think he's a worthy GPP flyer here, if only because out of all these bottom end guys, like the bottom 15 guys in this tournament, if you told me that one of them won at the end of the week, Siwoo Kim would probably be my pick. But if you also quiz me on who would be dead last, it would probably be Siwoo. Actually, it'd probably be DA points. Let's be real here. Second last could be Siwoo Kim.
Yeah, no, that's what you kind of get from him. He has really good win equity, but if he doesn't hit it's a disaster. And yes, he could finish very, very far down the leaderboard, but definitely worth it if you're looking for a home run play down here.
I think I would prefer Siwoo in my lineups over like Kyle Stanley or Hadwin or Vegas or Horschel, even knowing that he probably has a much bigger chance of finishing behind those guys because of that win equity and the sort of the hot fire that he can get on when he gets rolling. And let's not forget, like I mentioned, the corollary courses that I'm looking at big time, the John Deere Classic was the biggest one, but then the next two on that list are Pebble Beach and the Wyndham, and one of Siwoo's 2 career wins and his like 40 career starts was the Wyndham Championship.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's one of those guys, you just have to hope you get him, he gets going and he gives you the good side of it. It's just you have to be prepared that he could really, tank your teams. But that's the risk you want to take. I don't know how useful it's going to be to take someone, say you take Billy Horschel and he comes in 25th. I don't know how useful that's really going to be. I'd rather try to take a stab with one of these guys.
DA Points won the Puerto Rico Open, by the way.
Ah, of course.
And Chris Stroud, I can't even find what he won. I think it was the Barracuda or the Barbasol. It was one of the two.
Yeah, I never mind. I just answered I was going to ask what Blix, he won the team thing, right?
Yeah, he won the team event with Cam Smith. And then, Cam Smith legit went in the tank after that win.
That's what happens when you play with Jonas Blix, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, this is just, when you look down here, I feel like, they kind of mashed the prices. For me, there's some guys here who are wildly underpriced, and then some guys that I just really have no interest in playing. So I do think it's a pretty good, you're going to probably have to take someone from this range, but I'm pretty comfortable with a couple of the options.
So who do you think are the most underpriced in this range? Because the one problem with Grayson is that there's not reachable par fives for him to really put that to use, which he's so good at. But he is a really good wedge player too. Like when I ran the correlation, actually I'll run it again right now, and I'll try to do it over like the past 50 rounds or so. But when I combined inside 125 yards and beyond 200 yards, where the majority of the approach shots are going to come from, he rated out exceptionally well. So did Kisner.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know how underpriced Grayson is, but there's no doubt that I'm going to have exposure. I love him in non-cuts. I just like the way he plays. And yeah, it should suit him, kind of what I'm envisioning. But, you have Vegas at the same price point. I think he's undervalued. I don't even think he's going to be popular. And then we keep saying Wes Bryant basically at the min, totally different skill set. In terms of correlation, they couldn't be any more different. But definitely a guy that I'm interested in playing.
Well, I'm looking at the FantasyNational.com live ownership projections too, and these get updated the more and more people use it. And by Wednesday night, they're actually quite accurate. This is, in full disclosure, you're watching this on a Wednesday or listening to this on a Wednesday. We're talking about this Tuesday afternoon, but it projected ownership from the bottom right now. People are trending towards Armour and Grayson Murray and Kyle Stanley. Those are your double-digit guys from below $7,000. Bryson's at 20% right now, at least by projections. And then you have Chris Stroud, 2.5, DA Points, 2.9. I'd much prefer. I don't like either of them. I would definitely go Stroud over DA Points though. Wes Bryant 11%, Jonas Blix 5%, Vegas 6%, and Grayson at 14%. You're getting Grayson at basically triple the ownership of Johnny Vegas, and they're two guys that have a very similar skill set.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I like Grayson, no doubt I have some, but you give me reduced ownership on Johnny Vegas. sign me up for that. I don't know how low, it's great that DA points and Stroud are that low, but I don't know if you really need to go there just because I have no reason to think that they finish any higher than kind of where they're priced. So, but yeah, I mean, I like Vegas, and I do think he'll be a little overlooked.
And it comes down to the one thing. When you're trying to make a contrarian move or pivot off of someone just to decrease ownership, I think the strategy of leaving a bit of money on the table is far more effective than pivoting off of Wes Bryant onto Chris Stroud.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of ways to get unique teams and to get leverage. It doesn't mean that you have to just go to the obvious chalk and then take a guy right around him that nobody likes. That usually doesn't work. So yeah, find a way to leave money on the table. Do a different type of build where you kind of, I find grouping salaries, definitely can do it. So if you just take like three guys at the same price, a lot of people don't do that. They tend to click and scroll down and click and scroll down and build like that.
So I ran that custom model on FantasyNational.com. I weighted 75 to 100-yard proximity 25%, 100 to 125 proximity 25%, beyond 200-yard proximity at 50% to try to get a full capture of this. And over the last 50 rounds, Grayson Murray is number one in that. And then it's Daniel Berger, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, Ricky Fowler, John Rahm, Brooks Koepka, Kevin Chappell, Bryson DeChambeau, and Wesley Bryan. Who was somewhat shocking. Even over the past 50 rounds, he's first from 100 and in. He's ninth from beyond 200 yards, which is kind of crazy. He's not actually as good from 100 to 125, which is kind of surprising if you're that good from in a little bit more. But I think that's sort of the range you want to go to. Now, obviously, 50 rounds, there could be missed tournaments in there. If I sort it by 100 rounds, it might spit out completely different guys. But I think those shorter hitters that appear on that list are some of the sleeper guys to target.
Yeah, no, I literally hope that that's the standing. That sounds a lot like my player pool. A lot of those guys I'm really high on. And I hope that's kind of how it unfolds. And that's why, when I make my lineups, I will try to correlate it a little just because, we never know. There's always, unquantifiable stuff. But if you pair similar skill sets, sometimes you can hit lightning in a bottle with something that turns out to be way more important than everyone thought it would.
What do you make of Kevin Chappell, finally, as the last guy? Like, it just, I can't wrap my mind around him whatsoever.
Yeah, neither can I. I mean, I think the price is pretty fair. I just don't know what to really make of him. I think he's going to get lost in terms of ownership, but at the same time, I honestly don't know how much I'm really going to have of him just because I prefer Perez, I prefer Henley, and honestly, I think I even prefer Steele to him.
I think if we're going to go with contrarian pivot play in there, I think Brendan Steele's the name.
Yeah, Chappell's one of those guys. Jason Day's not in this, so I would say pair them up because that's the guy he loves to kind of follow. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fine play. I wouldn't mind it, but I probably will have little to none.
If I run that same model for the proximity range but set it to the last 100 rounds, it spits out JT, Hideki, Dustin, Kisner, Wes Bryan, Ricky Fowler, Daniel Berger, Hudson Swafford, Brooks Koepka, and John Rahm. Hudson Swafford's never played this event before, but I mean, I bet him first-round leader. I think that he's a streaky enough player that I feel like he has one really low round in him, but he'll just be probably a disaster after that.
Yeah, I mean, again, non-cut, that's the kind of guy he gets a huge boost because normally you'd have to be worried if you get his disaster rounds early, it's over. But even if he has a couple ugly days, if he has one really, really low round, which he's more than capable of, he can kind of cover that up. And again, he's the type of guy, he may finish, say, 26th, which is not good, but he could have, the 19th most DraftKings points, which is obviously a little better. It's always nice to target a guy who can kind of outscore his placement.
All right. Comes down to this. We got to pick a winner. I'm going to start trying to do this every single week. I mean, I pick winners on my show with Feinberg, which is already out, which you can go watch. I'm picking Spieth. Even for my one and done, I'm picking Spieth. Screw it. Like the $1.3 million, there's no difference between the $1.2 million he wins here and the $1.2 million that he wins at some hoity-toity event. I think Spieth wins. Why not take him?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna kind of go on that wavelength because I'm gonna use in my one and done Rahm, and I think that he wins.
Oh, you're not going to save Rahm for Phoenix or the Farmers Insurance Open? Remember when everyone got into that last year? It's like, oh, I'm saving Rory for Quail Hollow, and then how did that work out?
Oh, at least Rory, I don't have to deal with Rory this week. They gave me a little reprieve. So, yeah, no, I think Rahm gets the season off well. I expect him to play really well this week.
All right, Ben Rasa. You can check out all of his work up at fanvice.com. Follow him on Twitter at JazzRazDFS. Tell us about the Slack chat at Fanvice, because I think that's a really cool feature.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. So when you sign up, we have channels. Basically, everyone has a login. You can go in there, kind of talk with us, talk with the members. It's just, a great thread and a ton of good stuff, that I see. People drop in really useful links, other stuff that they see. It's a great way, withdrawals and stuff for golf, and just a lot of fun. So, yeah, that's one of the best features Fanvice has.
Well, I will say, if you haven't gone back and watched our strategy session, I mean, I don't think it's bad by any means. I don't think it's gonna. If you watch it, you're just gonna win GPPs left and right. But we actually do talk about that, and really, I think the most important thing that we talked about in that was sort of the tips and tricks and bad habits that people get into. And I can see this 34-man field, a lot of names that you want to own. I think you really need to condense your core at the top this week if you want a shot at some of those GPPs. Like, it might seem fun to take everyone, but I feel like that's just going to kill you.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a week where there's a ton of people who are going to be not dead before the tournament starts, but at a huge disadvantage just by making mistakes like that with roster construction. It's so easy this week to just start. I mean, I find myself doing it where I'm just like, I don't really like this guy, but man, I'll just take a little. And then you're just going to end up raking yourself. You do have to make some uncomfortable stands. Obviously, these guys, especially up top, are all winners. Good players, so you have to make some stands and just live with it, or you're just going to be at a huge disadvantage.
Hey, like Bergerson said in that show, if you're not willing to lose everything and come dead last, there's basically no chance you can win. One of these giant ones, at least.
Yeah, no, you definitely have to be willing to kind of take some lumps if you're going for that in a large field tournament. You can't just spread it out too thin. You'll tread water for a little, but eventually it'll catch up with you.
And I think that comes into play a little bit more this week with a 34-man, no-cut event that just pick your, 10 guys, go overweight on, 5 of them, mix and match some guys at the bottom, but still have them 25 to 30% of your lineups. I think that's the strategy to use. It's up to you to pick the right guys.
Yeah, no, because, the last thing I'll say on that is just their ownership is going to be so inflated. If you don't play massive amount of lineups, even if you're playing, say, 20 or 30, if you start taking 20% of guys, 15% of guys, you're going to end up being, around the field, canceling guys out, slightly overweight, slightly underweight. It's not going to make any stands for you. You want to be way under or way over the field and have strong takes rather than just kind of matching the field.
I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter at ThePME. If you're looking for my DK Picks cheat sheet, that'll be up on DKPlaybook.com, updated if there's any withdrawals, and we'll make note of that inside of the column. If you're looking for the full picks and preview cheat sheet, that is up on my Facebook page, facebook.com/ThePME. Don't be afraid to give this an iTunes review, Stitcher review, Google Play review for the audio version, or just leave a comment and give us a like on the DraftKings YouTube page. Short clips will be available and exclusively on the DK Live app, so remember, go download it. It's actually the best for basically following along with football and golf. If you don't actually have a screen to watch, use the DK Live app. It's super legit. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck with the Tournament of Champions. I'll see you next time.